Okay, welcome to today's session of the PPM Attorney Capital Forum. I'm your host, Darin Mangum. Appreciate everybody joining today. Just getting started a few minutes late here in our Puerto Rico office, and tuning in. So hope everybody's having a great summer. We are attempting to get back on track. I know it's been a busy summer. I've been traveling quite a bit, but I think we're back on a schedule where we're able to broadcast every Thursday afternoon. That schedule should stay pretty good. We've done a few other sessions to catch up, but today we're going to be talking about marketing strategies for raising capital. And so you should be able to download, if you're logged in right now, you should be able to download the outline for forum session number 8, marketing strategies for raising capital. I think it's important to when you're looking at to have basically, obviously all of your legal information could be very much put together, and you could have a great story. But if you don't have a marketing strategy to actually get your offering in front of investors, then it may take a while, right? You definitely need to have a marketing strategy put together. The main topic, and I always ask the main point I always ask clients is, hey, who's your ideal investor? If you were to, whether you're raising maybe $1 million or $100 million or anywhere in between, you have to ask yourself, well, what's my ideal kind of investor? And that's going to largely not only tell you from a legal standpoint what exemptions are available to you or what regulations apply to you, but also if you know what your investor type is, your ideal investor type, then that's going to tell you where to go find those kind of investors, right? So, and I always like to refer to a fishing analogy, or whale hunting versus bass fishing versus mahi fishing. It just depends on what kind of fish are you looking for, right? And that's going to dictate what kind of strategy, not only where you go. If I'm going whale hunting, I'm going to be going to a specific areas where the whales hang out, and I'm going to have equipment that at my disposal that's ready to bring in that whale, right? But I have to be patient as well. It's going to take a while maybe to get in front of the investors that are whales that could write $1 million check. But if I'm going bass fishing, or if I'm looking for smaller investors, if I'm looking for really small investors, like a bunch of minnows, like non-accredited investors under regulation crowdfunding that are putting in $1,000 a pop, right? That's who I would consider a minnow, right? Very small investor. Or am I looking for accredited investors that are putting in, writing a check for anywhere from $20 to $50 to $100,000 a pop? That's going to really dictate my marketing strategy, right? And so, what I tell a lot of clients is, maybe those investors who maybe you already have a relationship with, or maybe they're not an investor per se, but maybe they're your customers, or maybe they are especially when it comes to like regulation crowdfunding. Oftentimes, if you have a fairly large customer base, those same customers that are already familiar with your product, they like your product, that's assuming they like your product because they're buying your product, they may be potential investors in your company, right? If they're presented the opportunity. If they're very loyal to your brand, if they like what you're, the product you're selling, then certainly they are potential investors, right? Now, if I have a client, for an example, who is a dentist, and they have a dental technology. He has a dental technology company where he comes up with various dental inventions that other dentists could implement into their practices. Okay, in order to save money or to be more efficient. Obviously, he wouldn't necessarily go and sell that to his customers, his patients, right? That might be a little bit. It might be a little bit unethical. I don't know. It could be it could be done, but most of those clients or those customers or patients of theirs, all they know is they need their teeth cleaned. All they know is they need their teeth fixed. They're not really going to understand the technical aspects. Number one, they're not going to really understand the technical aspects of this equipment maybe that he's invented. And number two, they probably, they're just, patients, right? They're not like necessarily possibly wealthy people that are patients of a dentist. Now, it could be wrong. I mean, maybe he does high-end clients, Hollywood clients maybe, but for the most part, likely his patients are not ideal investors. And what I told him was, well, probably other dentists, right? Other dentists in your field that can appreciate the technology, especially if it's a medical technology or some sort of technology that they themselves can quickly grasp and understand, and they can say, hey, look, this I can see how this could save me money, right? That's something that he could go to his network of other dentists, of whom most dentists or doctors or medical professionals, they make pretty good incomes, and so that they're possibly qualified to invest based on that. But then they also understand the technology, they understand maybe the potential of it, and so that would be your natural pool of investors to go to. And so when that person is, and again, in talking to this dentist, as far as putting together a marketing strategy, it would make better sense for him to maybe put on a presentation at his clinic, or maybe a demonstration where he can invite other dentists to and see he can demonstrate the technology or explain the technology, and then based on and he already has the network or the relationships with those dentists, and so he can. It's not like he's hitting them up to sell them an investment. So he could certainly put together a marketing strategy under, say, Rule 506B, Bravo, which is a private placement, which enables you, if you have a pre-existing relationship with the investor, which in this case he would, because he's a dentist and these are fellow dentists that he knows, and he wouldn't necessarily, maybe put on a demonstration of the technology for the express purpose of investing. He's just demonstrating the technology, right? Saying, hey, I invented this technology, maybe you might be interested in this technology, right? And so that's something that he could easily do a presentation on, and then after that, if the dentist attends the presentation, likes what they see, then he's naturally then going to be in an opportunity to say, hey, by the way, I've got an opportunity if you wanted to invest in this technology. I've got a PPM. I'm willing to pay. I'm willing to give you the terms of this investment outlined in the PPM, and if you want to help back the rollout of this technology, blah blah blah, right? So anyway, that's just an example of how a marketing strategy could be kind of pulled together. And this particular dentist has done really, really well, just going to existing dentists. It's an easy sell, and a lot of dentists have money to invest anyway. So and they trust him because he's a fellow colleague. It's not like he's got build a lot of credibility with them in the first place, right? So anyway, but that's just an example. So you definitely want to gear your marketing strategy around your particular network, right? Now, how do you build a network of investors or potential investors, right? That's something that could be done in a number of ways. I mentioned putting together a presentation or a demonstration of the technology. That's something that this dentist did. You could certainly do what a lot of people are doing nowadays is they'll put on a free webinar or even an in-person seminar. They'll invite people to not necessarily to sell them anything, unless you're doing a 506c. A 506c, you just come straight out and say, hey, if you're a accredited investor, then you're welcome to come to this presentation. We're going to talk about our company. We're going to talk about our fund or our fund strategy, and maybe if you like what you see, there'll be an opportunity to invest. If you're doing 506c, you can just get right to the point. You don't have to beat around the bush and say, hey, here's a presentation, and then later, if you're interested, we'll set up a second meeting, right? So it depends on that, right? As far as if a lot of your investors, if a lot of your existing contacts, that they're not accredited, but likely have money to invest, like a sophisticated, non-accredited investor would be, then okay, that makes sense to do a two-step approach versus a one-step, right? And so, but yeah, as far as you definitely don't want to overlook your existing network of potential investors that you have already on your Rolodex, so to speak, or on your phone. People they already know and they already know you, right? Or they may not themselves know of an investor. They themselves may not be an investor, but they know of somebody who might be interested. So, so obviously go to your existing network. Especially if it's a professional organization, I definitely tell people to steer clear of fraternal organizations, networking, or especially like religious organizations like your church or mosque or synagogue. You definitely don't want to. It's kind of bad form to be pitching an investment opportunity at church or pitching. If it's a social organization, it may come across as bad form, right? But certainly you may have already developed a relationship already through one of these other ways, and certainly that's obviously if they feel like they're a good fit, then that's something you want to look to. A lot of professional industry events are good, because you're talking to people that are in the industry, like if you're doing a real estate project, talking to other realtors, talking to appraisers, different real estate networking events are great because again, maybe the people there at the event are not potential investors themselves, but they may be connected with investors as well, right? And so putting together a marketing strategy around, hey, we're going to maybe go and do a booth at a certain event in order to get exposure, and then obviously again depending on if you're doing a 506c or a 506b or a regulation crowdfunding, that'll dictate whether or not you can actually publicly advertise it, right? And so again, the general rule is, hey, if you're doing a 506c or regulation crowdfunding, it's a one step, right? You can advertise, you can market, say, hey, we're raising capital, hey, here's an opportunity here. If it's a 506b, then it has to be a two-step process where you have to first establish that relationship in some way, right? Actually, a lot of people do is they'll put together like a newsletter or they'll do an ebook, just to garner interest, where they're positioning themselves as an authority in the space, and that's a great way to do it, as far as the establishing that initial contact. But then later you can then circle back to them and say, hey, how did you like the book? Or, hey, how did you like the newsletter? Was it helpful to you? How did you like the webinar? Was that helpful to you? And then only then would you then say, hey, hey, if you liked what you heard, we happen to have an investment fund, or maybe a private offering available to accredited investors and sophisticated investors, and maybe it might be something you might be interested in. If so, let's talk, right? So there are other ways, like obviously networking platforms. LinkedIn, again, is again not specifically designed to raise capital, but it's certainly a way to do some networking. And social media is also another way. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. Actually, I think next week. I'm going to be talking about that in a minute. But leveraging social media, email marketing, and all of that, right? So the main thing that you need to be focused on when you're putting together a marketing strategy is crafting a compelling investment story. Basically, you have to craft your an elevator pitch, and again, keep it as simple as possible. But you have to explain the reason why. What makes your company different, or what's your story? Where did you get this idea from, and why would that be? What's the value proposition that you're putting forward, right? That is not being addressed by other people in the marketplace, right? So having a great story, and again, a lot of people are having success using YouTube, putting together a YouTube video that basically says, hey, this is our company, this is where kind of we came from, these are our values, and this is where people love a good story, right? Hey, this is where we started this company in this garage, or we saw this need in the marketplace, or we saw these undervalued assets, real estate assets, and we decided, what, if the big boys can do it, then we can do it, So we decided to put together a fund and to go do it, right? And so, but yeah, being able to just put together a very simple, straightforward narrative. Again, whether you do a YouTube video, or whether you do a PowerPoint presentation. The important thing is just getting that story across, right? So, once you've got that story, then you can decide what sort of digital marketing channels. We've talked about social media quite a bit. Next week's session is all about social media, using social media. But the main thing you want to do is position yourself as an authority in that particular niche, and really hammer it home, like in social media posts, and any sort of other forum like YouTube or LinkedIn. You want to basically position yourself as an authority in the space, right? Now you definitely want to, when you're doing a digital marketing strategy, you definitely want to make sure that your marketing materials are in compliance. You definitely want to make sure you've got the right disclosures around it. You just don't want to posting things out there without any sort of reference back to your PPM. You definitely want to have a PPM already finalized and ready to go anytime anytime you launch a marketing campaign. That way, if an investor inquires, then you have that ready to go. In other words, the investment opportunity is not based solely upon some pitch deck or solely upon some slick advertisement or marketing materials, right? You definitely want to point to the PPM in order to cover yourself, right? And so that's really the key in that instance. And so I think next week we're going to dive deeper into social media, how to really do that. But again, whether you're trying to post on various investor network forums, or whether you just using YouTube or some other forum or some other medium, you definitely want to make sure that it's directed to the investors that you're intending to target, and that also that you're also that you have the appropriate disclaimers, like I said, that qualify the information by the further details like risk factors and use of proceeds and all that's set forth in the PPM. Certainly, you want to position the offering so that the PPM is the definitive selling document, and you want to make sure that your marketing materials are very summarized reflection of that PPM. The deal terms line up, and everything is kosher that way. Certainly when it comes to marketing, communication is key. Making sure that you're having. I see I've got a few questions that are coming in. And I'll try to address those in a minute here. Let me just make a note there. Let me just make a note here. And Josh, okay. We'll address these questions at the end, I think. When it comes to also making sure, marketing strategy is important, but also to make sure that you have that you nurture those relationships, that the same way you would nurture a relationship with a potential investor, right? Giving them updates, showing them how credible you are, giving them timely updates, things like that. You definitely want to do that after the investor already comes in, right? You don't want to just take their money and then, okay, see you later. No, you want to definitely keep them informed. You want to keep them apprised of what's happening, and keep them in the loop that way. So, so that's certainly important. Now, making sure that you're, you definitely want to make sure any kind of advertisements that you put out there definitely are you run those by legal counsel, competent securities law legal counsel. It doesn't have to be us. It could be any securities attorney professional that is familiar with this space, but definitely want to make sure that you've got the appropriate disclaimers in there, that you're not sending out marketing materials in a public way when you're relying upon a private offering exemption. That was certainly a way to people get in trouble, right? Competent securities counsel will be able to give you the right disclaimers to put in your emails, the disclaimers to put on your pitch deck, and all of that, right? In addition to obviously, drafting your PPM for you, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's important to reflect and evaluate what marketing strategies are working. Sometimes clients think that all their investors are going to be coming from online, and then they find out, lo and behold, that a lot of their investors are coming in from referrals from other people that they know. It's important to pay attention to that and not just think, oh, I'm going to get all my investors from these Google ads that I'm running, or I'm going to get them all from this networking platform, LinkedIn or whatever, right? Because there may be very, very much other investor sources that you may be overlooking if you're focused exclusively on one particular aspect, like these Google ads are going to be everything, right? So I think it's important to evaluate on an ongoing basis what is working, and just because you're not getting any traction doesn't mean that your investment opportunity has less appeal or there's something wrong with it. It just means maybe that you're not getting in front of the right people, or that it hasn't, just because they haven't invested yet doesn't mean that you should give up and throw in the towel, right? You just have to constantly be evaluating what works and what doesn't, and you try to dial that in, right? So anyway, that's kind of an overview of things to consider when you're putting together a marketing strategy for raising capital. I've got a few questions here that we're going to cover. As far as case studies and examples, I mentioned the one case by the dentist, right? If the offering is again, you have to look at the investors. What kind of investors would be interested in this, or what investors would understand what we're talking about. If you're selling like a cryptocurrency offering, or if you're selling a real estate offering, certainly people that are already in the industry may not be investors themselves, but they may have connections with investors because they're in that space, right? And so it's important to maybe leverage those relationships in order to get the word out. Another example of I use the dentist example. That I had another client who had a new pharmaceutical drug that they were trying to raise capital for, and they were going around pitching doctors that would likely be prescribing the drug, and they said, hey, there's also an opportunity here to invest, right? And so that was a great source of capital raising for them. Certainly, like if you're doing say raising capital for a sports team, right? Like a soccer team, raising capital, certainly going to the fans, and maybe not all the fans, but certainly maybe the fans that have high-priced seats in the stadium. Those would be probably ideal people to approach about it possibly being an investor, right? And anyway, it's something that you could always put together a presentation on, and then try to test it out in the marketplace and see how it goes, right? So that's those are some key examples. Josh here, he says, hey, I've got a cryptocurrency and I'm trying to I'm trying to sell it to non-US investors. How do I do that? Well, I think we've talked about different types of exemptions. I think we've mainly talked about Rule 506B, 506C, regulation crowdfunding. Maybe we haven't talked about Regulation S that much yet, but Regulation S is a is an exemption that applies for offerings that are conducted outside the United States, and all the investors of which are all non-U.S. persons, right? Now you don't have to put together a separate offering necessarily for a Regulation S offering, but it's you certainly can. You definitely want to, if the people that you're marketing to in, say, a different jurisdiction, a non-U.S. jurisdiction, happen to not be accredited, or they happen to come across your offering, there's certainly ways you can accommodate them anyway. And a lot of times they may be accredited already, but possibly you may want to look at Regulation S, as long as they're not inside the United States, or they're not a resident of the United States. They certainly can become fair game. We have lots of clients who are they have Canadian investors, or different clients and customers in Mexico, or investors in Mexico, and they want to be able to sell their offering to them. Certainly you basically want as many overlapping exemptions as possible. You definitely want to say, hey, we're going to conduct this under Regulation D, Rule 506B or 506C, and possibly also in connection with Regulation S, as in SAM, and that way you can accommodate those non-U.S. people. Josh, the only ones that are the only people that are really going to be excluded as a non-U.S. investor from investing would be somebody if they're on the Treasury Department's OFAC list or something like that. Then that's something that they, if they're some sanctioned person, or they're part of some sanctioned government or sanctioned organization, then they would probably be bad news. But for the most part, that's not. 99 times out of 100, that's not a factor. And so, but anyway, if you have specific questions, Josh, you can definitely reach out. We can talk offline about that in more detail. Tom had a question. Hey, I'm trying to do, can I do a 506B or a 506B and a 506C at the same time? The answer to that is no. You can't do a 506B, which is a private offering, at the same time you're doing a public offering, which is a 506C, right? Public advertising. If you try to do both at the same time, they basically cancel each other out, because 506B does not allow for public solicitation, which is what you'd be doing and potentially be doing. And also 506C also requires you to verify the investors, which, while it's not required under 506B, certainly is under 506C, right? So they're really two totally different set of rules. Now, what you can do, Tom, is you can do a regulation crowdfunding offering at the same time you're doing a Rule 506C offering, right? And so basically we call that a side-by-side. I think we've talked about it on the forum before, where you do a 506C offering to accredited investors, and they get their set of paperwork and their set of filings with the SEC. At the same time, you're also, the same company, the same deal is offering a regulation crowdfunding offering, and that is available to non-accredited investors. Obviously, you have to do it through a crowdfunding platform. You can't just do it direct like a 506C would. You have to do it through a regulation crowdfunding. But you certainly can advertise both, right? You could say, hey, if you're advertising the regulation crowdfunding offering, obviously you want to point them back to the portal. You want to make sure you maintain compliance with the existing rules around verification and all that. But yeah, you definitely can do that. And then at the same time, you might have a 506C offering available to accredit investors, and that's done. Obviously you don't need a crowdfunding platform for that, right? So, but you can certainly, at that point, you're just sort of directing traffic. You're saying, hey, if you're accredited, come in direct, or if you're not accredited, then come in through the regulation crowdfunding portal. A lot of crowdfunding portals, they'll also list if you have a Rule 506, if you have a regulation crowdfunding offering, and you have a 506C offering available at the same time, they'll usually go ahead and agree to list that as well on the platform. It really shouldn't cost you any more, but some may charge an additional amount, and really that's just to keep the paperwork separate, and keep everything in one place, right? Because a lot of crowdfunding platforms, they will do definitely help you keep track of all that documentation, right? So anyway, so yeah, Tom, yeah, hopefully that answers your question there. Yeah, so I think that's kind of a good overview. I appreciate those questions. If you have other questions, you can feel free to email me at Darin at mangumlaw.net. Or I think we have an email for the forum now. It's called forum@mangumlaw.net, and that email may be updated in the materials here. But anyway, yeah. So marketing strategy. If we can help you dive into a specific marketing strategy, whether we've put together your PPM or not, definitely let us know. We'd be glad to help you. We definitely have relationships. I'll get to capital sources in a second. I wanted to introduce our current recommended capital source that we're working with. But as far as marketing goes, we do have some relationships with some various online marketing agencies that will put together for a very reasonable amount. They'll put together a marketing campaign around a particular offering. Again, whether you're doing a 506C or a 506B or a regulation crowdfunding, they'll put together a marketing strategy that enables you to get the word out, to share your story, and raise capital from investors, right? So they've got a package of services that we can turn you on to that helps you get the ball rolling and helps get your offering out there in front of investors, and for a very reasonable amount. So let us know if you're interested in that. Happy to make that introduction. And also, as far as the capital sources, Marquee Equity is the capital source that they're more of an aggregator / finder. They basically introduce you to several dozen capital sources that have the capacity to write checks for the whole amount, or they may take a small position. Just depends, right? Depends on who's doing what and what. It just depends on how much your capital you're raising. So anyway, so yeah, definitely if you're interested in talking with Marquee Capital, we'd be glad to set up that appointment and make arrangements for you to chat with them, get to know them better. Anyway, so yeah, next forum session, I believe we are talking about. We're going to be talking about. Let's see. Marketing. Oh, okay. Yeah. So next week, we're going to talk about social media a few weeks from now. But next week, I think we're talking about brokers, finders, and other money raisers, which is a great. That'll be a great session to attend. I encourage all of you to. Check that out. And anyway, we appreciate you being a member of the forum. Again, if you missed this video, hopefully you're able to watch it on the platform. And obviously, our past sessions are, as long as you're a member of the forum, you can have access to those and watch those. And be sure to download the handout outline as well. And anyway, I appreciate you guys being here, and Like I said, if you have any further questions, let us know, and we'll catch you on the next forum. Have a good day. Bye.